How can you truly tell if someone deeply loves you, even if they never say the words? Not with grand gestures, not with passionate declarations, but with something quieter, something that moves beneath the surface of daily life? And why is it that sometimes the most powerful love feels almost invisible, yet leaves an imprint on our hearts that nothing can erase? Welcome, dear friends, to Stillness Unfolded, where we journey beyond appearances, beyond noise, into the sacred spaces where truth gently reveals itself. Today, we'll explore 7 sacred signs that someone truly, deeply loves you, not through empty promises, but through silent presence, subtle care, and unwavering patience. These signs are rooted in the timeless wisdom of Zen and Buddhist teachings, and they may completely transform how you understand love, not just from others, but also within yourself. I invite you to walk this path with me, slowly, mindfully, because throughout this video, we'll uncover subtle truths that can easily be missed if we rush. Each insight builds upon the last, weaving a picture of love that is far deeper, far quieter, and far more lasting than what the world often tells us. So please, if you find resonance here, give this video a like to support our growing community. Subscribe to Stillness Unfolded so you don't miss future journeys like this, and share your reflections in the comments. Your voice helps nourish this space for everyone. This is a video filled with deep reflections and transformative insights, so I encourage you to stay with me until the very end. There are treasures waiting for you that only reveal themselves when the heart is fully open. Let us begin. 1. They anticipate your needs without being asked. In a small monastery nestled among whispering pines and misty trails, there lived a cook who barely spoke. He was not the abbot who gave inspiring sermons, nor the teacher who led long hours of meditation. He was simply the one who fed the monks, swept the floors, and mended the robes. Few paid him much mind, but he noticed everything. When the youngest monk stumbled into the meditation hall with exhaustion clouding his eyes, a bowl of warm congee would appear at his side, steam rising like a silent blessing. When an elder forgot his sandals outside during a sudden downpour, they would be waiting dry and clean by his door by morning. No one had to ask. No one had to beg. No gratitude was demanded. The care was simply given, like breath to the lungs. This humble cook, without titles or fame, lived out the first sacred sign of true love, awareness. Not the awareness that seeks to invade or to control, but the awareness that listens without ears and sees without seeking applause. It is a mindfulness woven into action, sati, the art of being so fully present with another being that you become attuned to what is unspoken. In Buddhist practice, this type of attentiveness is not about fixing or saving someone. It is about being with, about entering so deeply into the shared space that you notice the subtlest shifts, the sagging of a shoulder, the silence that grows too heavy, the sorrow hidden behind forced smiles. Someone who loves you deeply does not wait for you to break down before stepping in. They sense the small ruptures before they become large. They notice the unspoken weariness, the silent longing, the quiet battles you are too tired to name. And they respond, not dramatically, not for recognition, but with a subtle act of kindness that reminds you, you are seen. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, have you ever known someone like this? Someone who simply knew, without explanations, what your heart needed before you even found the words. Or perhaps even more importantly, have you ever been that someone? Mindful enough, still enough, selfless enough to truly notice the hidden aches in another? In the quiet philosophy of Zen, the earth is often used as a metaphor for unconditional love. The ground does not question your steps. It does not demand you walk lighter or tread more carefully. It simply bears your weight, again and again, without complaint. In the same way, love that anticipates your needs moves without fanfare. It is not loud like fireworks. It is steady like sunlight filtering through leaves, present even when unseen, nourishing even when unacknowledged. To love like this is a form of deep practice, a practice of stepping beyond your own desires long enough to feel the pulse of another's being. It requires patience, humility, and an open heart. And when you are loved like this, truly seen and supported in your silent needs, it feels less like being helped and more like being held by something timeless and sacred. 2. Their absence feels full, not empty. There was once a young monk who, after many seasons of silent study, felt a stirring within him, a call to seek deeper solitude. With the blessing of his teachers, he ventured into the mountains alone, carrying only a worn robe, a wooden bowl, and the teachings tucked close to his heart. The forest welcomed him with its endless stillness. The streams sang. The wind moved through the trees like a sacred chant. He had all the peace he thought he needed. And yet, something gnawed at him. The meals he prepared tasted bland. The birds' songs, once sweet, now sounded hollow. Even the sunsets, those glorious bursts of color, seemed muted. He had not realized how much of his inner peace had been nourished not just by the silence of the monastery, but by the invisible presence of someone who had quietly supported him. Someone who had asked nothing, said little, but whose being had gently sustained his own. In Buddhist wisdom, we learn that true love is not dependent on constant nearness. It is not measured by daily conversations or by physical closeness. Instead, it leaves an imprint, an invisible echo that continues to nourish even after the person has stepped away. In the Heart Sutra, it is said, "Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form." The absence of someone who truly loves you is never barren. It is not a cold void. Instead, it is a living presence, a sacred spaciousness in which their kindness, their tenderness, still blooms. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever missed someone, not with desperation, but with quiet gratitude? Not because you needed them to be present, but because even their absence carried a fragrance of love that lingered? Or maybe, have you ever become that echo in someone else's life? Leaving behind not wounds or longing, but a spacious memory of peace. In Zen, they say that the sound of a temple bell does not end when the bell itself stills. The reverberation lingers in the air, touching all who listen deeply enough to hear. Real love is like that. It is not the loud clanging of constant attention. It is the subtle resonance of devotion that endures even when the form is no longer seen. To love like this is to understand that we are not here to own each other, to tether spirits with chains of obligation. We are here to plant seeds of presence so deeply that when we part ways, what remains is not emptiness, but a fertile field where peace continues to grow. If their leaving does not break you but strengthens you, if their absence reminds you of your own fullness rather than your lack, know that you have been loved deeply. And perhaps, without realizing it, you too are leaving traces of that kind of love in the lives around you. An invisible, sacred offering that no distance can erase. 3. They make space for your pain without trying to fix it. There was a day when the rain poured endlessly over the monastery grounds. The youngest monk, who usually greeted each sunrise with quiet joy, sat hunched beneath the ancient Bodhi tree, his robe soaked, his spirit heavier still. He didn't know why the sadness had come. There had been no great tragedy, no sharp loss, just a slow, creeping ache that tightened in his chest and blurred his sight. Many passed by, offering platitudes. Be strong. This too shall pass. Focus on your practice. But one elder monk simply came and sat beside him. No words, no lessons, just presence. He didn't attempt to stop the tears. He didn't rush to offer solutions. He simply allowed the boy's sorrow to exist, without judgment, without fear. This is the third sacred sign of true love, the capacity to hold space for another's pain without trying to fix it. In Buddhist teachings, suffering, dukkha, is not something to be swiftly removed as if it were a stain. It is to be understood, embraced, and ultimately transcended through wisdom and compassion. Not by force, but by allowing it the dignity of its own unfolding. When someone truly loves you, they do not silence your sorrow with hurried advice. They do not invalidate your experience with hollow reassurances. Instead, they become the stillness in which your suffering is allowed to breathe. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in pain, and someone rushed to fix you instead of feeling you? Or perhaps, have you ever been blessed by someone who simply sat with your sorrow, quietly telling you through their presence, you are not alone? In the Zen tradition, clouds are often used as a metaphor for emotion. When walking, just walk. When crying, just cry. No need to label. No need to resist. Just witness. Just be. True love understands this. It doesn't fear your sadness. It doesn't feel burdened by your darkness. It allows you to crumble without rushing you to rebuild. It lets your heart break open at its own pace. trusting that healing will come when it is ready, not before. To love someone's pain without needing to cure it is to trust deeply in the resilience of their soul. It is an act of surrender. It is an act of faith. It is one of the purest forms of compassion. When you find someone who does not flinch at your tears, who does not demand you smile, who does not recoil at your shadows, know that you have encountered something sacred. And perhaps even more powerfully, when you become that unwavering presence for another, when you sit with their brokenness without the urge to sweep it away, you are not just offering love. You are embodying the very heart of the Buddha's path. For they value peace over ego. It was during the monsoon season that two monks found themselves in conflict. The younger, caught in the turbulence of his own unresolved emotions, spoke harsh words, sharp as thorns, designed not to communicate but to wound. The elder monk, the one often called the quiet river by his peers, listened. His face was calm, his eyes steady. When the verbal storm ended, he did not reply with anger. He did not defend himself. He simply bowed his head and walked away. For several days, silence lay between them. Not the cold silence of resentment, but the warm, fertile stillness where understanding could take root. And when the younger monk, burdened by regret, finally approached, he was not met with punishment or distance. He was met with tea, freshly brewed, sweet with the scent of jasmine. He was met with the same smile, the same acceptance, as if nothing had been lost. This is the fourth sacred sign of true love, the willingness to choose peace over pride. In the Zen tradition, the greatest victory is not over others, it is over the self. To restrain the impulse to retaliate, to set down the sword of being right, to protect the bond, even when your own ego cries out for validation. Pause for a moment and consider. Have you ever been in an argument where winning felt more important than understanding? Or have you ever experienced the healing power of someone who chose connection over competition? True love, rooted in wisdom, understands that pride is fleeting, but the wounds it inflicts can last a lifetime. It knows that no victory in battle is worth the death of trust. It recognizes that sometimes the greatest strength is not in speaking the final word, but in offering the first hand of peace. Buddha once taught, hatred is never appeased by hatred. Hatred is appeased only by love. It is easy to love when love is easy, but to love through hurt, to remain kind through misunderstanding, that is a higher path, one that demands true spiritual maturity. Choosing peace does not mean silencing yourself out of fear. It means speaking, acting, and even withdrawing from a place of centeredness, rather than from the chaos of wounded pride. It means remembering that no moment of anger is more important than a lifetime of trust. If someone in your life protects the space between you, refusing to let temporary emotions destroy something timeless, know that you are held in a rare kind of love. And if you find the strength within yourself to lay down your pride, to choose forgiveness over vindication, to choose healing over being right, then you are not just loving someone else. You are also liberating your own heart. In the end, the quiet river is stronger than the raging fire. It nourishes. It endures. It moves mountains, not by force, but by steady, patient grace. 5. They let you evolve, even without them. Seasons passed, and with them, the restlessness within the young monk grew. There was a stirring in his soul, a whisper that called him beyond the monastery walls, beyond the familiar chants and daily rituals, into a world unknown. He struggled with this desire. Would leaving dishonor his teachers? Would it be seen as ingratitude? But the longing was undeniable. It was not rebellion. It was the natural unfolding of his journey. When he finally summoned the courage to tell the elder monk, the one who had so often been his silent refuge, his voice trembled. He expected disappointment. He feared rejection. But the elder simply smiled, eyes shining with a quiet, knowing light. Go, he said. Follow where your heart leads you. My love for you does not bind, it frees. And so the young monk departed, carrying not guilt, not sorrow, but a profound sense of blessing. This is the fifth sacred sign of true love, the willingness to let you grow, even if it means growing away from them. In Buddhist wisdom, there is a deep understanding that attachment, upadana, is the root of suffering. Real love is not about possession. It is about presence without ownership. support without chains. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt held back by someone who claimed to love you? Or have you ever been gifted the rare blessing of someone who loved you enough to let you fly, even when it hurt? Zen teaches impermanence, anicca. Everything changes. Nothing remains fixed. To resist change is to resist life itself. And so, true love must be courageous enough to allow transformation. To trust that even if your paths diverge, the bond of genuine care remains unbroken. To celebrate your becoming, even if it leads you into realms they may never see. There is a Zen saying, let go or be dragged. But when applied to love, letting go is not an act of abandonment. It is an act of sacred trust. It says, I believe in your journey, even if it takes you beyond my sight. I rejoice in your growth, even if it leaves me behind. This kind of love requires a heart free from self-centered longing. It demands a maturity that recognizes that love's highest expression is freedom, not fear. If someone in your life has ever released you with open hands, has ever blessed your journey without resentment, know that you have been loved in one of the rarest, most profound ways possible. And if you find within yourself the strength to love like this, to support someone's evolution without tethering them to your expectations, you are walking the path of the Bodhisattva, the one who acts not out of need, but out of compassion. Real love says, go become who you are meant to be. And wherever that becoming takes you, know that my love for you does not diminish. It deepens across every distance, across every change. 6. They inspire your transformation without pushing it. Years slipped away like mist dissolving into the morning light. The young monk, now a traveler, wandered across distant lands, through forests heavy with ancient trees, across deserts that shimmered under unrelenting suns, up mountains whose peaks kissed the heavens. He studied with sages, listened to teachers, sat in silence with the stars. But in quiet moments, when the world hushed its noise, his mind would drift back, not to the grand teachings or the great sermons, but to the elder monk who had loved him without condition. Not once had that elder demanded he change. Not once had he said, be like this, or become like that. And yet, without realizing it, the young monk had been shaped, softened, deepened, refined, simply by being near him. This is the 6th sacred sign of true love. They inspire your transformation without pushing it. In Zen philosophy, the greatest teaching is often wordless. The true master teaches by being, not by commanding. Their very presence becomes a mirror, reflecting back the best parts of you, even the parts you have yet to recognize. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, has there been someone in your life whose quiet example lifted you higher without ever forcing you? Or have you ever witnessed someone becoming better, not through your advice, but simply through your silent kindness? True love does not hammer at your faults. It does not pressure you into becoming a version of yourself that fits another's mold. Instead, it shines so steadily, so authentically, that you cannot help but grow toward its light. Like the sun coaxing a seed to sprout, not by shouting, but simply by being itself. Love, in its highest form, nurtures growth without demand. The Dhammapada teaches, the fragrance of a virtuous life travels against the wind. The good person shines from afar like the Himalayas. In other words, when someone embodies truth, kindness, and humility, their influence reaches you without effort. Their way of being stirs something dormant within you, not by criticism, not by manipulation, but by silent invitation. To love like this is to understand that transformation cannot be forced. It must rise from within. It must be chosen freely, not imposed. If someone in your life has ever helped you unfold into a better version of yourself, not through control, but through inspiration, know that you have been loved profoundly. And if you find yourself becoming a silent light for others, simply by walking your own path with authenticity and grace, you are practicing one of the purest forms of spiritual love. Real love whispers, you are enough as you are. And by offering that acceptance, it plants a quiet courage in your heart. The courage to become even more than you ever thought possible. 7. Their love persists beyond time, silence, and distance. After many years, shaped by travels and teachings, the monk finally returned to the place where his journey had first begun. The bamboo grove still whispered with the same ancient songs. The stone paths, worn by countless footsteps, still cradled the earth with their quiet strength. And there, beneath the familiar canopy of stars, stood the elder monk, older, perhaps, but unchanged in spirit. No grand welcomes were needed. No flood of words or recounting of missed years. Just a bowl of warm tea, pressed gently into the traveler's hands. Just a meeting of eyes that said everything. I have always been here. This is the seventh sacred sign of true love. Their love remains, even when tested by time, distance, and silence. In the Zen tradition, true love is not measured by how tightly you hold on, but by how steadily you remain open, through all seasons, through all distances, through all changes. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever reconnected with someone after a long silence and realized that the bond between you had not faded, but deepened? Or have you yourself remained a quiet presence for someone, without demand or expectation, across the changing tides of life? Buddhism teaches the virtue of patience, not merely as endurance, but as a profound acceptance of the way things unfold beyond our control. In love, patience means understanding that connection does not depend on constant proximity. It trusts that the threads woven by genuine care are not easily broken. It believes that real love, once born from compassion and presence, does not wither, it ripens. Like the lotus, whose roots remain anchored deep in the unseen mud, real love holds firm beneath the surface, untouched by the tempests above. To love like this is to know that even if the words stop, even if the visits grow rare, even if years pass in silence, the presence remains alive within the heart. There is a Zen proverb, "No snowflake ever falls in the wrong place." And likewise, no meeting of true hearts ever occurs in vain. Even separations have their sacred purpose. Even silences are part of the music. If someone's love for you has endured, not out of obligation, not through guilt, but through quiet, unwavering presence, know that you have touched something eternal. And if you find, within your own being, the ability to love someone across distance and time, to keep the flame alive without needing to grasp or possess, then you are living one of the highest teachings of the Dharma. Real love does not demand updates. It does not tally visits. It does not decay with the seasons. It endures because it was never built on conditions. It was built on truth. And when you encounter that love, whether through another's heart or within your own, you are standing in the presence of something that even time must bow to.